Welcome back, everyone. Kevin Carpenter, CPP Events. We're here to talk about ACCU, joined by Matt Godbolt and Jason Turner. You know, it's one of these things. I haven't done two of these at a time, so we'll see how this goes. But we're all excited about ACCU, right?
Isn't it ACCU now? Don't we call it ACCU?
I thought it was a chew. Yeah.
Yes.
A chew. All right. So I think we should probably know. But so what do you want to talk about? I'm so excited. I can't wait.
I mean, teaching an old dog new tricks, which I think is kind of funny because your profile picture has you holding a cat.
Well, there is a dog behind me, although he's asleep at the moment.
Oh, doggy.
So
he's
happy. Yeah, you see him over here somewhere. Yeah. I don't know how well that comes out.
I just thought he was part of the furniture for a minute there.
No, he's the same color pretty much, so he does blend in. I mean, it's an excuse to talk about things I love, which makes for very easy conference talk fodder, right? If you love it, you can talk about it without slides, without anything, without preparation. And I won't say that it's like that, because as Jason knows, as he's been on the brunt of the receiving end of my Discord DMs for the last month and a half, I've been working
on. That's for sure.
But it's been an awful lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But it's a labor of love, and I'm lucky that I have the opportunity and time to labor on that love and present what I've found. So I'm super thrilled. So I'm the old dog in this, just to be clear, right? I'm the old dog. And the new trick is
I've got older on both of you. Maybe we'll see.
We're close, I think.
Yeah.
We're showing it in different ways.
I get sunburned up here. You know, we had this conversation before, man.
I've been fortunate on that front, but yeah, I'm definitely. Yeah. I had a haircut yesterday, and the amount of gray around my feet was. Oh no!
Yeah,
what's happened? But distinguished is what I am.
So, has the work been on the comparison of the Sinclair or on the preparing for it being an anchor keynote? I mean,
yeah, no pressure. Don't keep giving me more pressure. It's been on the Spectrum emulator actually. So the talk is about my journey of discovery and using the medium of writing a new program from scratch in modern C++. And I know modern C++ doesn't really mean anything. We're probably postmodern now, I think, or contemporary. Abstract C. No, I don't know what it's called, but it's whatever it is. I picked up and I turned on the C++26 flag and I used the newest compiler I could find.
Wow.
And I am trying to use all the things that it lets me with varying levels of success. And moreover, I'm trying to teach myself to not be so knee-jerk negative towards new ways of doing things, which I think really is the crux of the talk. Not to do too many spoilers, but it has been a journey of discovery for Muggins here to realize that actually I've been allowed myself to get too far behind the curve, and learning a new thing is a noble enterprise, and in fact a necessary one for people in our profession, which is and fun. So but it's turned out to be a ton more work.
I have to say, and I want Jason to chime in on this, because I saw the part where, using stood ranges versus for loops, which immediately as I was reading that, I was getting ready to go through some of our code, even at the office, and be like, oh my gosh, how many for loops do we still have? Which made me think then, of course, Sean Parent, no raw loops.
No raw loops, right.
And so I'm guessing that this is probably something in one of your best practice classes, Jason?
It is. So ranges specifically is a little bit tricky, but I think this whole topic is ironic, Matt. You just said that you are trying to teach yourself to not be knee-jerk reaction against new features. Isn't that the entire genesis of Compiler Explorer?
Yes. But I think I think you're right, actually. There's definitely an irony there. Yeah. I think... And maybe this is part more this is a soul-searching moment, really. It's I think there is a set of things that I have internalized as being, these are okay. And I didn't realize I did that, right? I know that to loop over, to Compiler Explorer was using range fors rather than, regular for I equals 0 to 10 type loops. And intrinsically, I believe that those things should be the same. And so when I was arguing with my boss to say, can we use these things? I felt like I was in a strong position. Whereas I am less sure of of what the compiler can do if I use all of these other more abstract modern techniques. Because at my heart, I'm an assembly programmer, and I've always used C as like a macro assembler. And then I've kind of learned as time's ticked on that you can defer and delegate more and more responsibility to the programmer. But I've kind of found a point that's a sweet spot for me where I can look at a range for and be like, that'll be fine. But I look at some relatively complicated template expansion and I'm like, is this good or not? I don't know anymore, right? Or should I rely on, link time optimization doing all the things that I would like it to do? Or should I just push everything into the header and make it constexpr and constexpr-everything along the way? I know some people have opinions on that. Maybe all the things should be constexpr. And then, but what trade-offs does that have? Because I have, as Jason well knows, because we've talked about this a lot, yeah. I have my set in my Wales idea about like why it's not necessarily always the best thing to expose all of your program to all of the rest of your program from a build time point of view, from a overwhelming the compiler maybe type of point of view. But I don't know that that's a well-formed opinion. That's just something I have realized I have held and hung on to since reading John Lakos's book in the early aughts about how to lay out my software. And maybe that's different. And maybe you should come to my talk and you'll find out whether or not I've had an epiphany or not.
Well, I'm very curious whether or not you've had an epiphany, because I do have my own opinions. Kevin started by asking whether or not there's a best practice that I have here. And my conclusion is use ranges and views where they help.
Yeah.
If you abuse them, which I tried to do, I tried to use ranges and views all the things in a recent project, and my compile time and run times suffered once I got a little too carried away with it. So I kind of dialed things back a little bit. And now I do have an opinion. I have an intuition about what I expect. But I'm sure it changes literally with every point release of the compilers.
Right.
And to some extent, it affects your own and your business, if it's a business or whatever you're trying to optimize for in your process. Right. How important it is for developers to be able to do their work quickly. For me personally, if I can possibly get something to turn around in a few seconds and have my tests run and I'm good, then I'm in my happy place. But if a technique allows me to get performance at runtime, that means I have a 30-second build every single time, there might be a business case for that. It may be like, ideally, of course, 3 seconds. Everyone would take a 3-second build as opposed to a 30-second build. But if it means that you can get a much more performant end result, and that's actually what your job is, or that's actually what you're trying to achieve, maybe you just have to accept that. And then there's a continuum in between, and there are other dimensions as well. And ultimately, we're engineers and we're solving a complicated optimization problem, trying to find the best place on a very complicated hyperdimensional surface and say, where are we? And where, but we bring along our own baggage to that. And so, yeah, it should be interesting to see what I turn out, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask one other thing about that now, since you're writing everything, security, security got hit on with C++. I want to say a year ago a lot, it was covered a lot. But since you are writing it all new, to that part of things that are held, like I have a view that is held about C++ and security. And so I'm curious if going all modern, does that give you a different view of security in C++?
For the specific thing that I'm working on now, probably not. Yeah, one of the beautiful things about writing an emulator, and although there is a very famous counterexample to what I'm about to say, is that if you're doing it right, you're essentially operating on a 64K array all of the time using a 16-bit index, which means that you definitionally can't go out of bounds and you can't do all of the things that we expect to be problematic. And the user input is the key down or not. And so you've just got a set of bits that you're flipping as to whether or not the keyboard's being pressed or not. And so there's not so much interaction. Now, that's not true when you're loading, say, a snapshot file from a file. So absolutely, yeah. And if you look at my code there, I'm certain you could find problems with it. And I haven't tried to be too modern C++-y on like those edge parts of the code, because I consider them to be relatively they're sort of out of scope from what I was imagining. But But there I tend to use .at to access things, which means immediately it's slow as heck potentially. I mean, who knows? I haven't looked at it, but I'm going to get some protection from reading outside of range of at least the vector that I read things into. That kind of feel. So yeah, it's interesting. Actually, one of the side effects of something I've been experimenting most recently is I've had to turn off exception handling in certain places. And that has been a bit of I'm kind of relying on things like .at, throwing an exception as being my way of detecting. And obviously abort happens if you throw an exception and you haven't got exceptions on and terminates to terminate, things like that. But it's not as nice for certain. And so it made me think that I have leaned heavily into that. And certainly in previous employers, exceptions we've used for exactly that. This is the program is exiting, but this is our way of getting a little bit of information out and trying to shut down TCP connections somewhat gracefully before we go away.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know where I forgot where we're going about security. So yeah, I think I lean into that for the exceptions can deal with some of those edge cases if your library or your functionality that you are calling uses exceptions to say you went out of bounds, that kind of feel. But you have to use those functions.
That reminds me, serious throwback here, working on ChaiScript's parser, because I like to tell this story to students. When I first ran a fuzz tester against ChaiScript, I ended up finding so many bugs. Ultimately, I had to end up rewriting the entire parsing engine. And I thought, up to that point, I could compile with no warnings with all the tools, all the memory checks, all the tools, 90% code coverage, right? No warnings. I knew the code was perfect. I run a fuzz tester and I find serious memory errors all over the place, right? Anyhow, I switched to .at, basically, not exactly, but I did every single one of my character indices was a range checked lookup. Mm-hmm. And I never really measured a performance difference because the actual performance cost was in building the AST. It wasn't in parsing those characters, right?
Right.
That's right. I mean, Fuzzer is a massively humbling experience. You can take, as you say, the most bulletproof code at it, and you're like, but that can't happen. And then, within 2 seconds, even AFL has found some paths, and you're like face palmingly and embarrassingly cap in hand going back to your boss saying, I'm going to need another week for this, if not more. So you're absolutely right. But yeah, and
coding the happy path is always easy, right? I mean,
right. Right. I mean, and like you mentioned 90% code coverage. I'm certain that some of the reasons for that 10% is that they were if checks for things that you thought were basically impossible to happen, but you figured you should check anyway, if this happens and this, whatever. And then the fuzzer finds a way to get to it and it's wrong. That's the classic.
Well, it was worse than that. In that particular code, I was doing things like if I found an open paren, I was parsing until I found a closed paren.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a problem. Don't write code like that.
It's easy to do. But no, it's a fascinating question you bring up because, I still live in a world where in my day job, security is thankfully not something I have to worry about because everything is closed to the outside world. And so all of the security flaws are ones we bring with us and make with us and that kind of stuff. But, if anyone's working with user input, then obviously that's a much bigger, or general purpose tools or anything. It's a bigger consideration.
And it's interesting because I'm in the same boat in a way because everything I get is from specifications. At the most, the most varied input I get is a credit card transaction coming in. Otherwise, we're moving data between networks and it's pretty well defined. But where I was saying I kind of had some hold-ons is, I do remember going back to 98 or C++11 and, back before we had range-based fours and you were able to run off the end. And, a lot of these old C++ errors that when people talk about security of C++, my point is it seems, and I feel that more of the modern features we have eliminate a lot of the, as much as we can shoot ourselves in the foot with C++, for writing standard applications, when you're not pushing every edge of the envelope, you can generally get a safe app out the gate with, some
generally.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot more tools at our disposal
now. Yeah.
And I think if you use them in a principled way, such as my good bearded friend will teach you,
yes,
then you can get that's a great beard. A good, 80, 90% of the way
Yep.
And this is the kind of argument you see on Reddit all the time. There's a sort of an argument about, C++ is unsafe. And then you get people like myself coming in and saying like, well, I not that I've done this, but like I've seen folks with more experience under their belt come in and say like, I haven't had a memory error in C++ in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, not a significant one. And that's certainly how I feel. Yeah. But also I haven't subjected my code to fuzzing and I don't have to. So maybe there's something that's going wrong. Like the biggest issues that I have are to do with lifetimes and threading. Where and that's always a bit warty if you don't want to introduce some kind of shared count between threads and stuff like that. And again, or like event systems where you have objects that have listeners and you have to make sure that the listener's alive for as long as the thing that can generate the events, and sort of some subtleties with things like that. But very often I'm able to construct a program that always has the longer lived things constructed before the shorter lived things that refer back to them. And then so by construction, it's right. But that's only by convention and bitter experience that I do it that way. And unique pointer is a tool to help with this. And shared pointer is something that I always regret writing every single time I've done it without fail. But it is another tool that's there to lead you off the scent. And, pointers and references can be used carefully and judiciously when you're trying to, refer to things that are somewhere else, making there are ways and means, but it's by convention, not through requirement. Unlike, say, something like Rust, where they say this has gone into the type system and the compiler is helping you much more than just saying you can't copy this unique pointer or you can't double destruct this unique pointer. So I think we have tools at our disposal, but they are not a panacea. And I think old farts like me saying things like, oh, I've never had a problem like that is not helping the debate, which is why I've kept out of that.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. So,
do either one of you watch a YouTuber called MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer?
I have seen some of their stuff, but I'm trying to remember what it is. It rings a bell.
It's all random things, but he just released an episode about how all Xbox 360s now can be cracked without needing to do a hardware mod. And what it comes down to, since you were just both talking about multi-threaded code, is a race condition in the desktop for the 360. And so you just run a carefully crafted program or whatever. It's not a program, but it's a save game file kind of situation. And it might take 10 minutes, but eventually it's going to hit that race condition. And then you get, whatever root access to your console or whatever you would call it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there are thread sanitizers as well. I just thought I would throw that out here while we're talking about these things.
That's a very good point.
That there are.
I've had mixed experience with their thread sanitizer myself, because most of the things that I end up doing when I'm using multi-threading will have like atomic related things, which the thread sanitizers kind of, to my knowledge, kind of throw their hands up and say, oh, I'm not so sure about this.
Right.
But if you're using mutants, if you're using mutants in your code, then the thread sanitizer is going to help you.
Or if you're not using mutexes, it will let you know that you should be.
That it will. Yeah, I was going to agree. That's, to the point of crafting the program, it's the shared state across threads that normally is the spots that I have to watch more often than not. But I do hear that there's a 3-day course on coroutines that'll get me the beginnings that I need to solve that.
Are you using coroutines in your project, Matt, by the way? I want to ask a spoiler here.
This is a spoiler. And as of this moment of the recording, no. It was promised. And I'm going to try and get something in. But as I have discovered during my using other languages that have coroutine equivalents, one of the unfortunate side effects of using coroutines is you tend to bifurcate your code into coroutine full functions and non-coroutine. They have a name for it in like JavaScript and things like that, or Python, where if it's async, then you always have to call it from another function that is either async aware or not. And so it kind of, like const correctness, has to sort of go through your program. And so having written the thing without it so far, I'm now staring at it going like, am I just going to have to copy paste a large chunk of code so that I can add all these annotations? Or am I going to have to get incredibly hacky with the preprocessor, which would have to be, I can't like type def it to be using co-return versus regular return. So I'm weighing up whether or not that's going to be a thing I can move forward with, or if I can do, and I may just do it for the experience, which is what this has all been about. Is this a
Yeah.
good experience? Like modules, are they a good experience? Modern using constexpr in as many things as I can. Good experience. What can I do with it? What limitations of it? What misconceptions might I have about how they work, for example?
Right.
But no code.
Yeah, sorry, I had to ask because Kevin and I had a little I went off on a rant about coroutines in my interview, which we recorded immediately before this. And for the sake of people watching this, yes, I basically did just decide that I couldn't leave and I needed to hang out while Matt was being interviewed.
And hence, here we all are.
And here we all are.
This is beautiful.
So
sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to say, for the sake of the viewers here, that if you don't know this, there's a little secret about how conferences are organized. And that is that the conference organizers tend to put the best talks at the end because they really want people to stick around for the entire conference.
Yes, they do.
So no pressure, Matt. But for those of you who are watching this, I'm excited about Matt's closing keynote because I know it's going to be good. And hopefully Matt's excited about it, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm desperately excited to talk about it. I am so thrilled about it. It's an interesting topic. I think it touches on loads of different aspects of programming in general. It touches on loads of really interesting hardware details. I get to sneak in a little tiny bit of performance related tuning stuff in there because, that's my other passion. And hopefully along the way, we all learn something about how to program and the choices that you make when you choose to write a program as well. So it's a parable for the ages, hopefully.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will be. And the other part that's interesting is not only is it weighted to the end for your closing keynote, but literally the sessions before your closing keynote is Jason Turner, Kevlin Henney, Jonathan Mueller, and John Lakos. All four other speakers that are, giving talks, and that's the hard part will be picking which one to go to.
I'm hoping someone comes to my
they're all
talk.
Recorded.
You'll be all right. Some people will turn up to yours. Maybe I'll turn up out of charity. Jason. Maybe I'd just be me in the front row. And I'd be me in the front row editing my slides.
I will say I previewed this for my user group, and it could have easily gone to 2 hours because of all the questions and the discussion and pushback that I got from my user group. And I'm like, we have to go now. Hopefully it won't. But I did ask Matt if he minded if I cut into his keynote. He said that wouldn't be a problem. Right? So...
Yeah, maybe not. Now, especially as I gave for my own local. So a big shout out to your local C and C++ meetup group. Go find them, go support them, give presentations, whatever. It's the lifeblood of in between conference stuff, and it's cheaper if you can't fly, all those good things, right? But yeah, I gave my presentation and I only had an hour slot, and I took an hour and 20 of that hour slot, and then we were there for another hour afterwards talking about all the things. So similar deal, but that was very unpolished, but also it wasn't complete. And now I've just spent another week and a half writing more code. So somehow I've got to jam it all in a way that hopefully will be entertaining, fun, and not me having to talk at 100 miles an hour in order to get all of the things that I want to say out.
Hey, they can start tearing down while you're still up on the stage talking. I'm sure people will stay around and listen. That is for sure.
Let's hope that it doesn't come to that. I have got that in my back pocket of I will be hoarsely croaking into just the three other people and chairs that have left into an empty room.
Well, so my first conference I get to travel for this year. I'm super excited. I was telling Jason, I'm looking forward to my 10.5-hour flight. Can't wait to get to Bristol. And just super excited to see you both there, and just a little over a week. So, and I appreciate your time today chatting.
This has been a lot of fun, and I can't wait either. I really can't. It's going to be so exciting, and to see the other talks as well as being, having to wait to the end to get rid of my own stress. I'm the only person in the whole conference that's going to be worrying until 6:30 p.m. on Friday.
Yeah, you won't be able to enjoy it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Core C++, when I presented there, I had to follow Bjarne, which was tough and nerve-wracking. But then Bjarne was the opening, which meant that I just stressed out for 1.5 hours, and then I had the rest of the conference to enjoy. So, But if I had Matt's skill, then, Matt will be cool as a cucumber all the way through the week. Catch him in the halls.
Yeah, exactly. Come speak to me.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. And we will see you in Bristol in a little over a week.
Thanks,
see you in a week.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Bye-bye.